Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Ted Scheinman's Camp Austen has been called funny and insightful, self-examining without being self-conscious, compact without feeling cramped, and a delight of invitation. In a haze of mourning, crumpets, and restrictive tights, Scheinman delivers a hilarious and poignant survey of one of the most enduring and passionate literary coteries in history. Ted Scheinman is a writer and scholar based in Southern California, where he works as senior editor at Pacific Standard Magazine. He's taught courses in journalism, satire, and poetry at the University of North Carolina, and has written for the New York Times, the Oxford American, Playboy, Slate, and many others. We're thrilled to have him with us this evening. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks to Skylight Books for hosting, and also to the Los Angeles Review of Books for co-hosting. I'd just like to reiterate this exhortation for you to pick up the Quarterly Journal. It's a really, really great magazine. So I'm here to discuss my book about the worldwide society of Jane Austen superfans, known as the Janeites, a term coined by George Saintsbury and immortalized in a 1924 short story by Rudyard Kipling. The Janeites are a delightful and curious species, a scattered band of acolytes who troop around the country and jet set to London or Bath or Mumbai or Tokyo, their luggage bursting with petticoats and paperbacks, and hand-annotated event schedules, and endless spools of laminated name tags. They attend the big annual Jane Austen Society of North America meeting, known as JASNA, but they also bop through a less trafficked circuit that, if one has the stamina, need never end. There's always another symposium at the local chapter of JASNA, or a talk by a professor at a nearby university on Austen and the Real Housewives of Uppercross. Or else, perhaps a screening of the Bollywood smash Pride and Prejudice. Like members of any secret society, Janeites identify each other through subtle or silent codes, and initiates all carry their motley badges of membership in the global Austen Circle, from novelty pens to silk-screened t-shirts. Keep calm and find Mr. Darcy is the most common. To playful indicators embedded in email addresses. For example, Eleanor-1811@bartoncottage.net will inspire trust among all similarly devoted correspondents. The Janeites argue passionately and intelligently about whether Captain Wentworth is a more ideal mate than Mr. Darcy. They write fan fiction that would surely scandalize Austen herself. And they unravel various crucial mysteries in the corpus, including the important question of how many umbrellas appear in the novels, and how many of those are furled. The answers are 7 and 6, respectively. The Janeites come to laugh and to learn, to dance and to listen, to admire and to be admired, to teach and be taught, to question their assumptions about Jane, and to confirm them. It is an intoxicating society, and some of their secrets are revealed in my book. My account of the broader diaspora of Janeites will necessitate a brief sketch of my family and myself. My mother, a professor of English, is herself a devoted scholar of Austen, and, as you will soon discover, that devotion did not confine itself to her professional life. It has recently come to my attention that I was meant to be born a girl named Jane. Everybody expected it, from my grandparents, who had 4 girls and no boys, to my mother, a professor of English and a devoted Janeite, to my father, who took the premonition as fact based on everyone else's blissfully firm convictions on the subject. I'm told that when I emerged, demonstrably male, my mother was briefly stunned, though she assures me that she got over the shock very quickly and came to accept me as a boy. My sister, who arrived 4 years later, fulfilled the prophecy and was named Jane. Not long ago, one of my sister's friends asked her if she'd been named for Austen. Omitting the secondary consideration that Jane is also a family name, my sister admitted this to be the case. The friend offered a sunny observation. Well, it could have been worse. She could have named you Fanny. You don't know how close you are to the truth, Jane replied. Fanny was the family dog. My mother indeed could hardly have groomed me better for Jainism. As I've said, a professor of English at a very small private university in upstate New York, Mom has been teaching and writing about Austen for nearly 40 years. She is, bless her heart, a neoclassicist, and what she lacks in conventional Austen elitism, she more than recoups in distaste for the Brontes. Under her tutelage, I was raised on a partial survey of the Brit-Lit canon. One particularly painful moment found me in tears at the tender age of 10 when, upon rereading the last chapter of David Copperfield, I became convinced that I would never find my Agnes, much as Dickens often despaired that he would never marry his wife's sister. He didn't. When we lived in England, before I had read much Austen or had any notion of the ongoing fealty she inspired, I was dragged along to see Austen's plaque in Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey, and the little Chawton cottage where Austen spent so many years, and even to her grave in Winchester Cathedral. For a brief period, any childhood illness experienced by my sister or me was treated with 6 installments of the 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice, plus Dayquil to taste. As you can tell, ours was an eccentric household. But if Austen was omnipresent in that household, we didn't have all that much exposure to Janeites, that little coterie of Austen lovers who have read the novels innumerable times, backwards and forwards, and who, most important, delight in clothing themselves like Austen's characters. You can call this dress-up, or make-believe, or adults behaving like children. The widely preferred term in the 21st century is cosplay, a modish portmanteau of costume and play that still, even after so many conferences and balls and Cornish teas, strikes a racy note in my imagination. The term is expansive and applies to people attending Star Trek conventions, or Kiss concerts, or Renaissance fairs, or Civil War reenactments, but also to various demimondes of sexual roleplay. The cosplay remains the very thing about which Austen skeptics will mock Janeites the most. Devotees of Tolstoy or Pynchon or Woolf, for example, do not make a habit of treating symposia as costume parties. And this threadbare seriousness sets them apart from the lacy zealotry of the Janeites. Now, the first steps to infiltrate any secret society are simple. Learn the language. Make friends. Strive to approximate the dress code. Eventually, if you're lucky, you will set them at their ease, even gain their trust. Then you write about them, of course, a betrayal that you hope earnestly they will forgive. She acknowledged it to be very fitting, writes the narrator in Persuasion, that every little social commonwealth should dictate its own matters of discourse, and hoped, ere long, to become a not unworthy member of the one she was now transplanted into. This, I think, is the essential attitude for reporting on any subculture. You must adapt yourself to the style, the cadence, of whatever little commonwealth you happen to find yourself in. In my case, when the time came for me to infiltrate the Janeites, I was partially prepared, at least genetically. It may be true that Jainism is an X-linked trait, inherited from one's mother, like colorblindness. Mom first attended Jasna in 1987 at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, delivering a paper called Sisterhood and Friendship in Jane Austen's juvenilia. But back then, Mom had not been an adept at the dress-up. She used to consider it, she says, beneath the dignity of a scholar, and in fact had never danced a minuet while wearing an empire waist gown, not until I dragged her into it anyway. Still, Mom knew from the start that Jainism was a big tent. In 1989, she gave a paper on friendship in Pride and Prejudice. The theme is emerging here. At that year's Jasna meeting in Santa Fe, and Mom was impressed when attendees at the banquet were asked to check their guns at the door. As I continued reporting on the Janeites, sometimes wearing a topcoat, cravat, and breeches, other times in civilian clothes, I began to see myself as something of a hapless visitor in a place that many other people simply called home. A lady once described to me her first impressions on visiting Austen World. "Finally," she said, "a place where one can be oneself." It would be easy to mock this declaration as hollow. The woman speaking it, after all, was dressed at the time in an empire waist dress and a bonnet that must have been the very hottest new thing in about 1808. Hardly a paragon of authenticity in the 21st century. But her statement, I think, contains a deep truth. For all the affectation, the Regency dialogue, and borrowed postures and dance moves of a different continent, a different age, there is somehow a holy frankness to the proceedings, a general sense of camaraderie and enterprise. Let's go mad a bit and argue over who stole the turkeys in Emma. Let's stroll through the quadrangle with parasols and lose ourselves in a better world that never existed. Austen mania is a collective folly, a religion in the sort of latitudinarian Anglican sense that stresses communion over orthodoxy, though I have been warned it is possible to be excommunicated. Janeism is a shared fiction that we tacitly agree to treat as real, and by coming together, we make it real. This is no small miracle. When you're with the Janeites, you often feel on the cusp of a homecoming. Janeites across the globe and across eras are united in the mystical properties that they find in material proximity to Austen herself, whether that material is an original signature, or a coat or corset that requires you to adopt the posture of a different age. To dress as Mr. Darcy, or as Henrietta Musgrove, or Lizzie Bennet, or John Thorpe, God forbid, is to be transported, altered, swept backward in time, and to feel, illusory or no, a closeness to an author as elusive as she is beloved. I never expected we should get so near Miss Austen in this world, Anna Fitzroy wrote to her sister Eliza in 1852. That nearness is the secret and joy of Janeite gatherings worldwide. And I'm going to read you a really, really short final excerpt about two of the keyest people in the history of the world. When friends and colleagues heard that I was reporting on the eccentric world of Jane Austen superfans, one question seemed to be uppermost. Do people hook up at Jane Austen camp? At first I grew irritated at these inquiries, which seemed to assume that Austen cosplay is somehow centrally about sex. It's not really, it's mainly about books, and only a little about sex. Still, as I spent more and more time in the world of the Janeites, I came to meet quite a few older couples for whom the Jane Austen summer camp doubled as a romantic getaway, a chance to rediscover the pleasures of flirting with one's spouse. Some, in the tradition of the critics R.W. Chapman and Catherine Metcalfe, had fallen in love with each other in part through discovering a mutual love for Austen. And there are various academic power couples across the world whose unions owe their beginning to an indiscreet moment at an Austen conference. As Kipling's narrator says in his 1924 short story called The Janeites, Austen remains a bit of a matchmaker even in death. And at the larger conferences, I occasionally met a child, conceived, the parents assured me, with the aid of Austen's prose as aphrodisiac. Most of the couples, though, are mixed couples, wherein one partner, often but not always the woman, a woman, that's actually what it says, is the true believer and the other partner a willing or sporting participant. On the first evening of the summer camp, I met one such couple, a vivacious pair of 60-somethings, the woman slim and glamorous in her bonnet and evening gown, and the man stout and kindly in an officer's jacket, rarely taking his eyes off his wife, whom he regarded at all times with a smile of mingled deference and infatuation. While we sat together over a late dessert, they explained their routine. The husband had performed theater in his college days, the wife said, distinguishing himself in yellow stockings as Malvolio in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. He had never read a word of Jane, she told me, but the first time I asked him to join me at a Jasna ball, he didn't blink. He went to have his fitting the very next day. The husband nodded at her and addressed me without looking at me. It is a bit like playing a role, he conceded, sounding almost bashful. And of course we have our games. He means courtship, she translated. The man grinned as if at his own foolishness and put down his cake fork. Sometimes we will separate before the ball and observe one another from across the room, he began. His wife, unable to hold back, cut in. And sometimes we dance with other people. The statement had a quality of risque confession, and she raised her eyebrows as though we were discussing a major scandal. The husband giggled. She lends me out, he explained. She won't tell you this, but I think it's because there are often so few men around, and she likes to see the women dancing. Liar, she declared in triumph. He's being very bad. The reason I have him dance with other people is so I can watch him. She squeezed his hand. He's very good. Her mate shook his head. We've been taking lessons for years, and I can claim only competence. The wife persisted. It is thrilling to watch him charm the others. They looked at each other, and she coaxed him. You can be so charming, and I'm not even sure you know it. But we always end up together, the man continued, dodging the compliment. After we spun the room with other people, that is. His wife leaned toward me and spoke in a stage whisper, widening her eyes suggestively. We always pretend that it's the first time we're meeting. That actually sounds really fun, I said. It is. My friends tease me about it. She paused and laughed. They say that we are kinky. That's not what it's about, the man said quickly. That's not why. She now held his hand in both of hers. It's nothing improper, just a little game, a vacation almost. She broke off, and they looked at each other, and it was difficult in that moment not to think of Admiral and Mrs. Croft in Persuasion, one of those older couples whose mutual good humor and evident marital bliss make such an impression on Anne Elliot. Like the Crofts, this couple has no children, and like the Crofts, after many years of marriage, they are still visibly in love. After a long, private pause, for its duration there was no one in the room except for the two of them, the husband turned to me, as though awakening, and said, "It can be a pleasure to meet one's wife as a stranger." The following day, while stealing a quiet moment in the shade of a tree, I spotted the wife in close conference with two other women, one on each of her arms as they traipsed across the quadrangle en route to a plenary discussion on mothers and daughters in the novels of Austen. The husband followed them at a distance of a few paces, laden with various objets. Under his right arm he carried a clutch of hardbound books, while his wife's reticule, a tiny period handbag, dangled from his wrist. On his left arm was a tote bag with an image of Colin Firth scowling in a frilly collar, and he busied his left hand snapping photos of the three ladies in procession. Occasionally he would stop to request that they turn around and effect a tableau. The ladies smiled and pretended to primp their hair like Betty Boops of the Regency. Before the quartet exited my field of vision, I saw the husband bounding in pursuit of the three women, yelping a bit and waving the reticule in the air. When we bumped into each other the next day, he told me he was worried his wife had forgotten her heart pills. My wife's friends said I had made a spectacle of myself, he told me, smiling at the figure he had cut. Still, it would hardly have been good manners not to inquire. Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions before we sign books. If anyone has burning questions.
What do you think Austen thought that men thought about sex?
Wow. Can you be more specific?
Well, did she think that men were interested in getting married for position or for title or for money or driven by more libidinous urges?
What do men want? Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So this wonderful gentleman over here has asked what Austen thinks men want. I think she covers it fairly exhaustively. She has the libidinous ones, to use your term, and let's see, Wickham and Willoughby. I think these are some of the great. Again, some nods. Wickham and Willoughby are sort of
Mr. Palmer as well.
The cads. Mr. Palmer as well. We got one from Mr. Palmer over here. This is great.
Mr. Palmer wasn't a cad, was he?
No, he did say in the book that he married Mrs. Palmer because she was young and beautiful and just stayed with her because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So there you have caddishness turned into a lifelong commitment.
Yes.
Without wholesale reform. Yeah, I think she casts a pretty wide net, right? You have the guys who are just abysmal cads. You have the cads who are behaving as though they're actual, Darcys or something. You have the Darcys who are mistaken for, I guess, greedy snobs, I guess is the simplest way to describe it. But yeah, I mean, Austen certainly, in the novels, portrays men as driven by all the desires you just described. And in some of the characters you see various humors compete. Will the libido win out over the, marrying the older woman who has the bigger fortune, right? Like these are in competition with each other. And the heroes in general are pretty much free of any major, taint to their virtue, right? Like Mr. Knightley, the worst thing that can be said of him is that he's a little boring, I think. This is why, arguments that Austen's novels are fundamentally conservative occasionally ring true to me, because like the men are such cutouts, the good guys are anyway. But the villains are very rich.
And what writer today do you think is most like Austen?
Most like Austen today. Let's see. Ian McEwan is often named as like the successor to Austen, which I get. I think like psychologically, I see why people say that. I think justifiably, Adele Waldman's novel in 2014, The Love Affairs of Nathaniel P, was discussed as like a modern Austen. It's a good comedy of manners. It's all about sexual ethics. It's a really good book. So I think those are two.
Right.
Two options for you. Yes, please. Enthusiastic stranger.
It seems like jazz and music, from the way you describe them, sort of combine scholarship culture and fan culture. Did you find that scholars could learn something from fandom, or vice versa, while you were at these meetings?
That's a fantastic question. This is a small room. Everybody heard the question, right?
Yeah.
All right. What can scholars learn from fandom? Yeah, I think, so first of all, you're right. These are interesting hybrid events or hybrid spaces where you have a lot of, pretty high-flying scholars, and you also have a lot of people who, have never cracked open an academic journal, but are pretty well trained in like agrarian and legal history. A lot of people know their contract and marriage law really well from the Regency, if they're like deep into Austen. Much better than I do, having studied her in grad school. So yeah, I think fans actually come in with often with like bodies of knowledge that we don't, not every scholar has. I will also say that the most interesting conversations at those conferences tend to be the ones that are like successfully, truly hybrid. The ones where you have fan culture properly represented and in conjunction with the scholars. To do that, you really need the scholars to meet other people halfway. You don't often have like the fan fictioners coming in and being like, these scholars don't deserve to be in the same room as us, although there's no reason they couldn't say that, but they don't. Scholars do say that about fan fictioners, as a rule. So I don't know. I think it's really good training, as sort of anti-snobbishness training for academics to interact with the public. And I'm not going to go off on a whole thing about saving the academy, but I do think that that talking to normal people a little more often in contexts like this that are about fun, they're about connection, and especially around Jane Austen, right? She gives you a sort of blueprint for how to socialize and have fun responsibly and meet people responsibly and all this stuff. I mean, she's a sort of artist of sociability, which makes a lot of sense when you have people gathering around her like this. So yeah, I mean, you identify what makes the conferences absolutely, that's the best part of them, is that occasionally tense but often really fruitful back and forth. Yeah, Paul.
So you mentioned that you studied Austen in grad school. I assume that you also taught her in classrooms.
A little bit, yeah.
So how is that different? You've got this world over here, everyone's super into it. What was it like to try to, because I teach too, you have to interest the students in the material. What did you do to try to hook them?
It's a good question. I mean, there are a handful of general gambits you can do. You can show them remixes, you can show them Clueless, show them the Amy Heckerling movie, which is a fantastic movie even if you haven't read Emma, but it's even better if you recognize that it's more than an homage to Emma, it's just a reboot. That's really great, and I think it actually hooks people. I know a variety of people that I've met at a variety of Austen conferences who were converted by that movie. So you can go that route, right? You can go through the pop culture route. I don't know. Having students sort of perform some of the scenes and sort of dramatize them worked really well. It got some of the gentlemen in the room to, I think, drop their guard a little bit. And when you have people playing these roles and actually sort of embodying them, even if they're not thinking about it that hard, it becomes more difficult for them to ask dumb questions like, why didn't Jane Austen just get a job? Which is the very common, it's like, oh, well, she seems like she was at Reeves, stuck in her house and, dependent on her male family members, and the answer is that she had a job and did it very well, which is why we still talk about her. But yeah, I mean, there's a sort of baseline of misogyny you need to get through with a variety of women writers. I think Austen is certainly among them. But I don't know. Yeah, I think you can break through. I would recommend making kids do some theater, because I shouldn't call them kids. Making bright young minds do some theater. Yeah. Yes?
Can you say more about this Kipling story, the Janeites? Is that
yeah.
The tone of it, or what is it? Is it admiring of the subculture, or what?
It is. Well, okay. So the Kipling story is it's called the Janeites. Obviously, I think I told you that 3 times in the weekend. It's really fun. It does. George Orwell dinged Kipling in his poetry for using dialect too frequently. I think Orwell found a mix of condescending and something worse, maybe just exoticizing or something. But the story is shot through with sort of working class dialect, Once you get into it, it's really working class dialect from 1922, London. And it's great. It is a really, really wild portrait of trauma. Because it's all of these people, I guess largely Freemasons who have survived the war. Most of them are crippled or maimed in some way, and also a little bit, shell-shocked, as we would have said at the time. And Kipling lost his son in the war, and had been, it's just the one son in the war, but he'd been a big drumbeater for it, and felt super guilty, and actually retreated to Bath for a while. And among other things, while he was there in sort of, not seclusion, but in sort of family grieving mode, he reread a whole bunch of Austen. He would do it aloud to the family. And so those are the facts I know. I don't know if that, compelled him to write the Janeites, but the way the story proceeds is that these, soldiers who survived are listening to this one working class mason called Humberstall, who drops all of his H's and all that stuff. And he joined a group of Janeites, which was a secret society in the British Army in 1915, I think. And he just, it's sort of, a little Conrad. It's sort of, there are three layers to the story. Humberstall is recounting this whole thing, and it's couched within this additional frame of a slightly more upper class veteran who's meeting Humberstall. So it's, I don't know. I'm maybe getting too detailed. No, but it's really, really cool because you have these guys who are just so earnestly into Jane Austen, and there's so much that they don't get about her, obviously, but there's so much they do get. And they name all the canons after he painted Lady he got drunk one night and painted Lady Catherine de Bug on one of the canons, which is the name of a really, really mean older lady in Pride and Prejudice. And he got fined and I think sent to the stocks briefly, but they reduced his sentence because they said that he had been accurate in characterizing that gun as having some sort of similarity to Lady Catherine de Bourgh. It's interesting. It's like a portrait of class in the British Army, and it's very much like a portrait of these weird men who are sort of picking up the pieces 6 years after the war. And as Humberstall explains that the Janeites helped him survive the war. Everyone else was like, shit, I wish we had that in the Holy Land. I wish we had that. When I was in Palestine, we didn't have any book clubs, and it's sort of surreal, but it's a very, very interesting document of what we would now call PTSD. So anyway, yes, please.
There have been, I think, in the last 10 years or so, a number of books that have ripped off Jane Austen. Right? You have Death Numbers Comes to Pemberley by
P. James, yeah,
and who wrote Austen Land, which Shannon was saying.
I haven't read. I heard it's fun, but I haven't read it.
What do you think there's something in particular about this particular time that we're in right now that kind of speaks to this desire to see Austen come up?
It's an interesting question. I want to be careful at generalizing about decades and stuff, right? Because the 90s was a big boom for Austen mania in the sort of multimedia way, and to me it sort of feels like we've sort of been riding it. I will say there are certain segments of the population who have been activated recently by some of the same things that people in World War II were activated by in looking back to Jane Austen for this sort of agrarian, Georgic, pre-industrial idyll where there's a real connection with the land and where people were careful about who they married. And the people who are really invested in that are generally there's a movement on the alt-right to co-opt Jane Austen as their laureate.
Really? What?
Yeah. Well, that's sort of what I was sort of inching toward, and I just figured I'd just rip off the Band-Aid. Yeah, it's happening. But it's also it's doomed to sputter because a lot of people will be wailing and gnashing their teeth at Western civilization and how it's declining because of demographic reasons and stuff like that. It's funny because in Jane Austen, the people who care most about blood and lineage are not the cool people. They're like, Sir Walter Elliot is the best person. He's morally speaking, he's the best person who really thinks that much about blood and lineage, and he's a terrible person. So I think these people are not reading Jane Austen very closely. But that does make a lot of sense, right? There's she's not considered a romantic writer, but you can understand how fascist romanticists might look back at this connection to the land. It's they were landed gentry, right? The soil was right there, as was the blood. So yeah. But that's not what you're asking about. You weren't asking about a reaction here.
Your thing is way there.
Okay.
Let's go there.
I think most of this, I think the reason people keep coming to these things, whether it's in the 20-teens or in the 90s, is not unrelated. Like there's a sort of like slightly more blissful, slightly more unquestioning enjoyment of the degree of prosperity. And also, like in the Regency, right, you didn't see any of the slavery that was contributing to your wealth. So you could have these great parties that would be as good as any plantation party, but you didn't have to like look at anyone who was suffering as a result. Which I think helps people. It's a little harder to be nostalgic for like the antebellum South, say, in polite company, than it is to be nostalgic for Jane Austen. Yeah, we all wish we had a neighborhood like that. I think. Max,
what's next for you? What can we expect from you?
Oh man, dinner. I think. Get some sushi. I'm working on some more nonfiction projects. We've got some great stuff in the works at Pacific Standard Magazine, to which you should all subscribe. And I'm working on some fiction, too, which you guys might be able to read someday. Lyle, did you have a question? Or Boris?
I had a question, but related to what you were saying before this. I think that's a great place to end, if you want to end it.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's sign some books. I'll let you guys go.
Yeah. No, you had that wonderful note about Tolstoy and other authors that don't inspire cults of fandom the way that Austen does.
Yeah.
Rowling does, right? J.K. Rowling. Tolkien. There's something about these immersive worlds, these overarching worlds between novels, into which one can sink.
And again, it's sort of, although Tolkien, it's like, it is pre-industrial, but it also has an industry in it. But it is the same sort of nostalgia, right, that we're thinking about. Is there something older and sort of truer and closer to the land? And you don't have to be a fascist to want some of that.
Beautifully organized.
Beautifully organized. That sounds a little fascist, but yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'll start the books.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.